Hi, I'm Rebecca Budig from All My Children. You've been watching some of the greatest classic weddings from All My Children, One Life to Live, and General Hospital. Now, we're going to take you behind the scenes to talk personally with some of your favorite stars about their most memorable daytime weddings. The proposals, the dresses, the romance, and as Cassie DePaiva from One Life to Live puts it,
right here. Right here. The rings just keep on getting bigger. You know what I mean?
From her start on All My Children in 1976 as a rebellious teenager, Brooke English has settled down a few times. Julia Barr shares how Brooke's first marriage to Tom Cudahy may not have been every girl's dream wedding, but it was still special, in its own way.
What I remember is that I was wearing a robe. He actually showed up at the house with a priest that we both, were well acquainted with, and said, "I want to marry you." We were married right then and there, which was more romantic, I think, than sometimes when there's a big event. So yes, I don't know how many people have been married in a robe on on All My Children, but I'm one of them.
As you probably remember, Brooke was swept off her feet again, this time by one of the most powerful men in Pine Valley, Adam Chandler.
I thought it was a fantastic idea when they decided to put Brooke and Adam together, because really in terms of moral guidelines they were diametrically opposed, and we'd been seeing each other and I didn't know I was getting married. He got me there on some pretense.
Brooke's third wedding to Tad Martin was a little more complicated.
Only in daytime, the one night thing, and Brooke got pregnant. Tad was involved in an accident and his body was never recovered. So when the character came back a couple of years later, there was Brooke with this son. That was one of the main impetuses for Brooke and Tad to marry.
Brooke was finally able to plan for her wedding ceremony when she married Tad, and she wore a beautiful dress designed especially for Julia Barr.
The detail of the neckline was copied from a dress I'd had that I loved so much because it was totally off the shoulder. It also had a dropped waistline which created this beautiful silhouette. So I was very happy, as opposed to another dress that I had to wear when Brooke and Edmund got married. I think it was actually a beautiful dress that had been sort of redesigned for me, but I put the dress on about 10 days after I'd come back from a 2-week vacation in Italy where I'd been eating pasta and bread and cheese and wine and pasta and bread and cheese. And it took 2 people to zip me into it.
Ryan, played by my close friend Cameron Mathison, has also gotten into some tight situations in Pine Valley. You see, Jillian needed a green card and Ryan needed to stay out of jail.
Of course, Ryan, thinking that she was rich, was like, "Fine, done. Deal. I'm in." And she was actually happy because she thought that Jillian thought that Ryan was rich too. And ultimately we were both poor, married, unhappy, and stuck together for a while because of the green card situation.
But in true soap opera fashion, once they got divorced, they fell in love and decided to marry again.
The vows were so beautiful. I remember that too. I remember sort of choking back emotion saying the vows. It's funny because it's still the longest relationship that I have ever had, on the show and off the show.
Cameron did notice other differences between real and on-camera weddings.
First of all, it takes forever to shoot. It takes substantially longer to get married on TV than it does in real life. Take it from me.
Weddings always take a long time to shoot, but we all know that they're really worth it. So it's great when they're church weddings because for the most part, most of the cast is seated. So they can, down below camera range, they've got books and newspapers and beverages and stuff like that. And then above the pew line, they're looking like just wonderful wedding guests.
That's Robin Strasser, who plays Dorian Lord on One Life to Live. Dorian has had a few marriages of her own.
Dorian wishes that she were lucky in love. Unfortunately, some of her greatest loves have been men she lost rather quickly, whether to other women or to circumstances that she created or to death. Yes. I should add that in a couple of cases, it was assumed that Dorian was responsible for the death of her husband. So that's why she took that "till death do us part" very seriously.
But each man in each wedding holds a special place in Dorian's heart.
When Dorian married Herb, I was still young enough as a person playing the part that I still had all these major romantic notions about the saying of vows. I was like having a little trouble keeping the boo-hoos, inward.
After a 3-year absence from Llanview, Dorian made a stunning comeback and raised a few eyebrows with her marriage to Mitch Lawrence.
Everybody was appalled that she even knew the horrible, scary, villainous Mitch, let alone that she was going to marry him. And once they were married, Mitch, because he didn't like to miss out on any opportunity, wanted to okay, pay up, hon. In this respect, we're going to be husband and wife, okay? If only for one night, And so Dorian had this big how to avoid, but that's another video. How to avoid consummating the marriage.
Like her Aunt Dorian, Blair, played by Cassie DePaiva, has had an interesting history with marriage.
I would say Blair, Kramer, Manning, Kramer, Manning, Kramer, Manning, Buchanan, Kramer, Manning, 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 Lawrence is a perennial loser at love. But she loves to be in love, and I think she chases love and has a big hole in her heart that she's trying to fill with something, and it always tends to be the wrong man.
And for Blair, the wrong man usually ends up being the same man.
Todd and Blair have been married many times. I can't even name the times. The first time was on a beach. She had kind of tricked him into marrying her because she said that she was pregnant. Well, then, of course, she really was pregnant. That's kind of happens with Blair. She kind of says she's going to be pregnant, and then, immaculate conception happens. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. Guess I'm going to have all your money.
And who could forget Blair and Todd's most spectacular ceremony, the gold balloons wedding?
To this day, when fans want to get Blair and Todd back together, they send the studio these gold balloons in an envelope. It's kind of crazy. My crazy fans. It was a beautiful wedding. It was a very romantic wedding.
But for whatever reason, Blair and Todd's marriages have always been a challenge.
We get either to the altar and it doesn't happen, or we get over the threshold and usually something hits the fan.
So in an effort to win her back, Todd had extensive plastic surgery, changed his name to Walker, and tricked Blair into falling for him once again.
Whatever lie is being covered up, it doesn't matter what it is, because all of it comes out to the same thing, is that he loves her, she loves him, and it seems like in the real world, in Llanview, the only way that these two people can get together is to base the relationship outside of the reality of what is really happening.
One of Blair's on-screen ceremonies had an uncanny similarity to Cassie DePaiva's real-life wedding.
For those of you who don't know, Max Holden, Jim DePaiva, is actually my real husband in real life, and we met here on One Life to Live. Jimmy and I had a lot of fun when Max and Blair finally got hitched. And that's kind of what it was hitched, because we went to Las Vegas. And in real life, we went down to Kentucky and didn't tell anybody and kind of got hitched the same way in a courthouse. So I didn't have a big soap opera glamorous wedding in real life, and we certainly didn't on the tube.
Sky on General Hospital did have a glamorous fairy tale wedding to Jack's. Robin Christopher explains how it quickly fell apart when the love of his life resurfaced.
Brenda. She came back into town. Everyone thought she was dead. She actually comes to their house on their honeymoon and hides out on the porch to try and get Jax's attention, which she does. So here's poor Jax in a quandary with his dead love here and his new wife here. Well, Sky sees Brenda a few days later, and a whole beautiful wedding sort of disappears into a memory.
Sky was devastated, but Robin was able to experience an elaborate wedding, even if it was make-believe.
As Robin, my husband and I eloped, so I never actually got to wear a wedding dress that Sky had worn. And so the whole big ceremonial hullabaloo was kind of nice to say, well, this is what it could have been like.
On the set, a wedding is always an anticipated event. Alicia Lee Willis, who plays Courtney on General Hospital, shares memories of her romantic ceremony with Jason.
Before we started taping it, I probably knew a few weeks beforehand. And I was excited. Originally, it was just going to be Jason and Courtney at the wedding. It was in France, countryside. It was just gorgeous. And she didn't expect anyone else to be there, but she turns around and Sonny and Carly show up, of course. But that just makes everything that much more perfect.
Wearing a beautiful gown is always a big part of the appeal for an actress.
Because it was such a fast wedding, the wardrobe department got me a dress from off the rack, and it was probably, I don't know, like $300. So anybody could get it. And it was so beautiful and simple and elegant. I felt pretty in it.
But not all weddings are joyous occasions. Emily on General Hospital was diagnosed with breast cancer. Natalia Livingston explains how that forced her character into a decision that she ultimately regretted.
She was very torn between these two wonderful men, Nicholas and Xander, and she loved both very, very much. It was a different kind of love, and she was slowly realizing that. So she was on her deathbed when Xander asked her to marry him, and she said yes, just to basically grant him his last wish.
While still in the hospital, Emily slipped into a coma and was finally able to marry her true love.
It's a beautiful, beautiful dream, and they tell each other how much they love each other and how much they wish they could spend their lives together. And she wakes up and realizes that, you know, that's not going to happen. She's actually married to another man.
Whether it's an off-the-rack dress or a gown that will be painstakingly designed, there are many considerations for costume designers like Susan Gammy of One Life to Live.
In daytime, what we're really doing is telling a story. So I always like to grab onto whatever it is that's kind of the most unique quality of that particular relationship and try to reflect that in the costume somehow.
Keeping the gowns fresh and unpredictable is also one of the challenges.
Blair's a really interesting case because she's been married so many times and almost married even more times. So if we go back and kind of review her dresses, some dresses are a little bit more optimistic, some are more romantic, some are a little bit more dangerous looking than other dresses.
Beau and Nora's rock and roll wedding was one of the most famous in the last decade, with a style all its own.
I designed a very kind of early 60s looking dress with a big poofy skirt that had a little jacket and that was appropriate for the wedding, and that later on, when the jacket came off, was a really fun little dance dress for her.
As flawless and beautiful as these weddings appear, even soap operas have their disasters on the big day.
I think probably the worst moment in my entire career occurred when Luna married Max. The man who was doing the alterations freaked out and returned the dress to the studio in pieces. We were gluing and stitching crystals on that dress, you know, right up until we went to camera. Fortunately, the wedding turned out beautifully, and the dress was a success too.
There are so many preparations and so many people working behind the scenes on daytime weddings, making sure they are truly special and memorable experiences for both the actors and the fans.
The budget is fairly limitless because it has to be. Daytime weddings are like real-life weddings. You know, you have to go deep into your pockets if you want to have this really classy, you know, first-class wedding, and daytime does it better than anybody.
When there's weddings on the set, it's definitely not like any other day. I mean, I think people get a little excited. How could you not? You know, I get to put on a wedding dress, which is always fun, and everybody gets dressed up, and we get to say these beautiful words to each other, and I think it's very special.
And then, of course, my character Greenlee married Leo. Don't make me cry. But on the soaps, as in real life, who knows what the future holds? So stay tuned.